Picture it, New York City, the early 1970s. The air is thick with exhaust fumes, the metallic rattle of the subway, and the electric, gritty hum of a music scene desperately searching for its next revolution. The cultural landscape was, well, it was caught in a vacuum, torn between the glittering, superficial sheen of glam rock and the heavier, brooding bands struggling to find a distinct identity. Out of this dark, neon-lit concrete jungle, a sound was brewing, a sound that would soon echo across stadiums worldwide. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're looking at the evolution of a true rock enigma, a man who completely redefined the electric guitar without ever learning how to read a single note of music.
He once said of himself, "I'm an anomaly. I'm an unschooled musician. I don't know how to read music, but I'm one of the most famous guitar players in the world." And it's true. Before the blinding pyrotechnics, before the silver face paint and the massive record-breaking arena tours, there was just Paul Daniel Frehley. The dichotomy here is genuinely staggering. How does a completely untrained player, someone relying purely on feel, become a global phenomenon whose riffs are studied by millions? Let's explore the intensely human force behind the iconic makeup, the turbulent journey, and the pure street instinct that guide him to the pantheon of rock history.
To really understand the man, we first need to look at his environment. The musical context of early 1970s New York was a landscape completely dominated by glamorous theatricality, kitsch, and fierce cutthroat competition. There was this fundamental clash going on between raw, heavy sound and theatrical excess. Bands had to dramatically distinguish themselves just to survive in a deeply saturated club scene. In late 1972, Kiss formed directly in the middle of all this chaos. And the sheer struggle required to break through that noise, it was immense. I mean, we're talking about a time when Frehley was driving a New York taxi part-time just to pay the rent, navigating the potholed, dangerous streets of the city by day, and by night, huddled in damp, freezing, empty rehearsal clubs, completely exhausted yet slowly crafting this heavy, bombastic sound. It was a profound clash of gritty, working-class reality and escapist, larger-than-life fantasy. Now, those unorthodox beginnings didn't start in a pristine recording studio. They started on the tough, unforgiving streets of the Bronx. Born in 1951, Paul grew up in a deeply musical family, but his adolescence was profoundly troubled. As a teenager, the streets called to him and he found himself drifting into a local street gang. It was a volatile, dangerous existence where violence was just a constant threat. Yet the entire trajectory of his life shifted when he received an electric guitar for Christmas in 1964. Fast forward to 1969, at just 18 years old, he's actually working as a roadie for Jimi Hendrix. Imagine that for a second. Being an impressionable kid from the Bronx, standing just feet away from Hendrix's towering Marshall stacks, literally feeling the physical power and volume vibrating right into your chest. Witnessing the raw, visceral live performances of bands like Cream and The Who, it effectively saved his life. Music became his ultimate escape route, pulling him away from that fatalistic gang culture and giving him a new, electrifying purpose. The crucial defining factor of his genius, though, was his absolute lack of formal training. Despite his father being a church organist and his siblings playing the piano, Ace refused a single traditional guitar lesson. He just couldn't conform to the rigid structure of a classroom. And it wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was an innate inability to be boxed in by rules he didn't write. He relied entirely on instinct, feeling the vibration of the strings, memorizing shapes and patterns on the fretboard, rather than reading sterile notes on a page. This lack of schooling, this untamed approach, it actually became his greatest, most authentic weapon. Which brings us to the spaceman's turning point. Every legend has an origin story, and Frehley's is perfectly bizarre and brilliantly authentic. In late 1972, Frehley answered an ad in the Village Voice for lead guitarist. He walked into this cramped audition room looking entirely out of place, famously wearing one red and one orange sneaker. To the highly ambitious founding members of the band, it was a visually absurd entrance. Yet the absolute second he plugged his guitar into the amplifier and struck a chord, the atmosphere shifted. A unique, undeniable, swaggering energy filled the room. Soon after, he birthed his spaceman alter ego, deeply inspired by his lifelong love of science fiction, astronomy, and space travel. He painted silver stars over his eyes, fully inhabiting this extraterrestrial rock persona. He even took a ruler to paper to design the band's iconic double lightning bolt logo himself. It was the final, perfect puzzle piece for the theatrical shock rock vision the band was building. Mainstream domination, however, wouldn't arrive until 1975. You see, for their first few records, the explosive, sweating, frenetic live energy of these four musicians simply couldn't be captured on tape. The studio recording techniques of the era were just too polished, too clinically clean to adequately contain Frehley's raw, overdriven tone.
They felt restrained. But everything changed with the release of the double live album Alive in 1975. It was an authentic, earth-shaking boom. Alive bypassed the sterile studio environment entirely and translated the sheer volume and raw power of their stage show directly into the grooves of the vinyl. It became the first platinum album in the history of American rock, utterly transforming the recording industry's perception of what a live album could achieve.
By 1978, his individual creative power was undeniable. To appease rising tensions within the group, all four members released solo albums simultaneously. Defying all expectations, it was Ace's album that became the highest-selling platinum juggernaut, and it was driven by the massive, infectious hit New York Groove. What made this track so special was how different it sounded from the band's standard catalog. It featured this stomping, swaggering rhythm and a pop sensibility that really highlighted his unique compositional genius. He proved, absolutely, that his songwriting, his infectious hooks, and his melodic style didn't just support the band, they could stand entirely on their own as a massive commercial force.
Moving on to his technical innovations and style, how exactly did he produce this earth-shattering noise? Let's break down the physical reality of his playing, because to truly understand the Spaceman, you have to look closely at his hands, his vintage amplifiers, and the way he physically attacked the guitar neck.
Frehley's physical approach to the instrument completely defied logic. His thumb draped entirely over the fretted neck. If you watch footage of his hands navigating the thick, worn neck of a vintage Gibson guitar, it breaks literally every rule of classical posture. For most players, this grip would severely limit their mobility. But for Ace, hooking his thumb completely over the top edge somehow unlocked a way to play incredibly heavy, chunking chords with immense power. When asked about it years later, he himself confessed he had absolutely no idea why or how he did it. It was simply a pure, unorthodox physical translation of the aggressive music he heard in his head.
And then there's his vibrato. Traditional virtuosos use subtle, rapid, controlled wrist movements to sustain a note beautifully. Ace, he favored a full-arm vibrato. He generated his signature wailing sustain by violently shaking his entire arm against the instrument. It wasn't a delicate flutter, it was a physical assault on the guitar that wrung every ounce of emotion from the wood and wire. Paul Stanley once remarked on this with deep amusement, mimicking how he himself would use his wrist like a trained musician, while laughing at the memory of Ace just throwing his entire shoulder and body weight into shaking the instrument like he was trying to break it in half.
This physical assault resulted in a highly specific tone, dry, incisive rhythms, and extreme volume. Frehley actively avoided delicate nuances or overcomplicated, sprawling pedal boards. He just plugged straight in. He favored a dry, powerfully clean tone, amplified to staggering, extreme volumes. This created a sweeping, explosive effect, a pulsation that was almost violent in its directness. His tone was a direct mirror of his no-nonsense, working-class Bronx Street upbringing. There was no hiding behind excessive effects. His technique was directly connected to pure, unfiltered emotion, stripping away the unnecessary to deliver a visceral punch to the gut.
But his innovation extended beyond his hands and into the literal wiring of his gear. He didn't just innovate musically, he transformed the guitar into a theatrical prop. He worked intimately with engineers to heavily modify his beloved Gibson Les Pauls. One famous custom build was engineered to literally emit thick, billowing smoke from its neck pickup during his solo, before shooting spinning, sparking pyrotechnics high into the arena rafters. Another guitar was wired with hundreds of bulbs, emitting light based exactly on the tempo of the song. The engineering required to fit these mechanics into a solid block of wood without destroying the instrument's playability was completely unprecedented. His instrument became an active, fiery, bleeding participant in the grand theater of his performance.
Which leads us to his explosive impact. This unique combination of theatrics and raw talent rippled outward, fundamentally changing the heavy metal genre forever, and captivating hundreds of thousands of fans over multiple decades.
As heavy metal evolved into the 1980s and 90s, the genre essentially split into two factions. On one side, you had the polished, formally schooled virtuoso, utterly obsessed with speed, sweeping arpeggios, and navigating complex classical scales. And then there was the raw, emotionally explosive Spaceman. Ace offered something fundamentally different to the academic approach. The emotional weight of his unschooled, aggressive street style resonated far deeper with rock audiences than overly adorned, lightning-fast playing ever could. He proved, time and time again, that a single, perfectly bent note, played with true authenticity, always cuts through the noise. Critics often noted that he played with an almost violent, highly effective pulsation, and that perfectly encapsulates his sheer force.
Frehley had a singular capacity to sustain notes with a precise, deafening volume that sliced cleanly through changing musical eras. From the psychedelic remnants of the 70s through the glossy hair metal of the 80s, right up to the modern era, his frenetic, atmospheric playing captivated millions. It endured because it was completely uncompromising and instantly recognizable the absolute second his pick struck the string.
Finally, let's look at his timeless rock legacy. Surviving the extreme volatility of the music industry is arguably as difficult as mastering the instrument itself. And Frehley's journey, well, it was far from simple.
The spaceman's disciples spanned generations and genres, creating a vast family tree of modern rock. The late great Dimebag Darrell of Pantera, one of metal's most revered figures, literally had Ace tattooed proudly on his chest, constantly citing Frehley's aggressive rhythm playing as the absolute blueprint for his own heavy groove. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine publicly called him his first guitar hero, deeply inspired by the way Ace used the guitar as a sonic weapon. Members of Foo Fighters, Pearl Jam, and countless others have continuously paid tribute. By relying on feeling over theory, his unorthodox street style successfully rewired the DNA of modern rock and metal. He taught an entire generation that attitude, swagger, and memorable melody matter infinitely more than formal, rigid scales.
Ultimately, his legacy is defined by his survival. The life of a rock god is perilous, and he navigated a treacherous, decades-long roller coaster. There was intense, bitter band politics, high-speed car chases, and deep, life-threatening struggles with substance abuse. The human element of his story is one of sheer endurance. He had to walk away from the biggest band in the world just to save his own life, a courageous move that eventually led him to finding enduring sobriety in 2006. In 2014, his monumental contribution was cemented when he was rightfully inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Despite all the turbulence, he maintained a continuous, passionate solo output. His 2024 album 10,000 Volts topped multiple charts, proving his creative fire was entirely undiminished right up until his tragic passing after a severe fall at his home in October 2025. The Eternal Spaceman. He transformed from a troubled, aimless kid actively avoiding gang life on the streets of New York into an absolutely irreplaceable rock soldier. His towering sound is forever immortalized in multi-platinum records, but far more importantly, it lives on in the calloused fingertips of every teenager who picks up an electric guitar, turns the amplifier all the way up to 10, and decides to just play loud. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question. How did a completely self-taught street kid permanently alter the DNA of rock and heavy metal? Perhaps the true answer is that formal training teaches you how to physically play the instrument, but raw, untamed, deeply human life teaches you exactly what to say with it. I hope this explainer has illuminated the incredibly passionate story behind the cosmic makeup. Thank you for joining me, and keep exploring.